Have you ever created a plan so ambitious that it made you feel proud before you completed a single day? You were going to get promoted, build a side business, become fluent in another language, save more money, read 30 books, repair every relationship, and transform your body. The list looked like evidence that you were serious. But 3 weeks later, nothing had moved far enough to change your life. You were busy every day. You were also beginning to fall behind everywhere. So what if having many goals is not proof of ambition? What if it is the reason your ambition never becomes visible? Hi, I'm Sarah, and this is WiseMind Stories. The second idea in the 6-month plan is simple, but emotionally difficult. You cannot build 10 futures with one ordinary life. Every goal you add is another promise made with the same 24 hours, the same attention, and the same limited supply of energy. In this episode, we will explore why choosing one direction can feel more frightening than working on 10, how scattered ambition protects us from being judged, and how to select one 6-month outcome without abandoning the rest of your life. To see why this matters, let's begin with Marcus. At 10:17 on a Thursday morning, Marcus Cole was standing before the leadership team of a medical technology company, waiting for a slide that would not load. His manager had given him 7 minutes to explain why customer renewals were falling. Marcus had wanted this opportunity for months. If the presentation went well, he would become the obvious candidate to lead a new strategy team. He clicked again. The slide appeared, but the figures were from the previous quarter. The chief operating officer noticed immediately. "Are these the final numbers?" she asked. Marcus looked toward his manager. He could have lied. Instead, he admitted that the analysis was not complete. The meeting moved on. 7 minutes later, Marcus was back at his desk, reading a message from his manager. "Let's discuss your priorities this afternoon." Marcus felt humiliated. But the word priorities also irritated him. He had plenty of priorities. That was the problem. On the wall of his apartment, Marcus kept a 6-month vision board divided into 8 sections. One section showed the senior strategy role he wanted. Another showed the logo for an online business he planned to launch. There was a podcast microphone, a photograph of a marathon finish line, a Spanish vocabulary schedule, an investing course, and a calendar for the social events he promised himself he would stop missing. Marcus did not think of himself as distracted. He thought of himself as multidimensional. On Monday nights, he edited podcast episodes. On Tuesday, he studied online advertising. Wednesday was Spanish. Thursday was supposed to be professional development, unless a friend invited him out. He ran on Saturday, worked on his business on Sunday, and tried to catch up with his actual job whenever anxiety became stronger than exhaustion. His calendar was full. His life was crowded with beginnings. The renewal analysis had not failed because Marcus lacked the ability to finish it. It failed because for 3 weeks it had competed with 7 other versions of him. That afternoon, his manager reassigned the executive review to Iris, another analyst on the team. Iris was not as fast as Marcus. She was not as charismatic. She did not have a side business or a personal brand. But for 4 months, she had done one thing relentlessly. She had become the person who understood customer retention better than anyone else in the department. Marcus watched her walk into the next leadership meeting carrying the presentation he had once imagined delivering. He told himself she had been lucky. Deep down, he knew she had been focused. Have you ever called someone lucky because admitting they were focused would force you to examine your own choices? That evening, Marcus met his friend Caleb at a quiet bar near the office. Caleb had known him since university, which meant he had watched Marcus begin more lives than most people attempt. Marcus told him about the presentation. I need a better system, he said. Maybe I should start waking up at 5. Caleb shook his head. You don't have a scheduling problem. Then what do I have? You keep trying to avoid the funeral. Marcus stared at him. Caleb explained. Every serious choice creates a loss. Choose the promotion, and the podcast may have to wait. Choose the business, and the marathon time may remain ordinary. Choose to become excellent at one skill, and you must tolerate being a beginner or merely average somewhere else. Marcus loved setting goals, because goals allowed every possible future to remain alive. Choosing one meant temporarily grieving the others. That grief was what he had been avoiding. Most people think focus is an intellectual decision. They compare opportunities, calculate returns, and select the rational option. But focus is often emotional. It means accepting that a good opportunity can still be wrong for this season. It means disappointing the version of you that wants to be admired for doing everything. It means closing doors without knowing whether the door you chose will open. The door you refuse to close can become the hallway you never leave. Marcus had another reason for keeping so many goals active. As long as he divided his effort, no single failure could define him. If the podcast did not grow, he could say work had been intense. If he did not earn the promotion, he could say he was building a business. If the business remained an unfinished website, he could point to the marathon training. Every goal provided an explanation for why another goal had not succeeded. The largest reversal in Marcus's story was this. His ambition was real, but scattered ambition had also become fear wearing a productive costume. When you fully commit to one outcome, the result can answer back. It can tell you that your strategy was weak, that your skill is not ready, or that you gave your best and still did not get what you wanted. 10 unfinished goals never have to deliver that verdict. They can remain beautiful possibilities forever. What are you protecting by keeping your most important goal permanently half-finished? Caleb asked Marcus to bring his vision board home and place it on the floor. Then he gave him 3 sheets of paper. On the first, Marcus wrote, the finish line. Not a vague identity such as, be successful. Not an outcome controlled entirely by someone else, such as, get promoted. He needed evidence he could create within 180 days. Marcus wrote, build and present a complete customer retention system that senior leadership can use without me in the room. That finish line could improve his chance of promotion, but it did not depend on a title being granted. It required him to master the data, create a useful tool, test it with real teams, and communicate it clearly. The outcome was specific enough to judge and valuable enough to change his career even if the company never promoted him. On the second page, he wrote, the price. This was harder. The podcast would pause for 6 months. The online business would remain offline. Spanish would become 10 minutes of maintenance instead of a major goal. He would still run because movement supported his energy, but the marathon would wait. He would protect dinner with his parents twice a month, and one evening with friends each week. Focus was not permission to destroy every relationship in the name of achievement. A priority without a sacrifice is only a wish with better branding. On the third page, Marcus wrote, the proof. He divided the finish line into visible weekly evidence. Interview 5 customer success managers. Clean the renewal data. Build the first model. Test it with one team. Document the result. Create the leadership presentation. The weeks would not be judged by how inspired he felt. They would be judged by what existed on Friday that had not existed on Monday. That was the moment Marcus's plan changed from a collection of identities into a sequence of work. At first, the new focus felt empty. On Monday evening, he reached automatically for his podcast software. When he remembered the pause, He felt as if he were wasting time. The discomfort was not boredom. It was withdrawal from possibility. Marcus had been using new projects to create small bursts of hope. Every new project allowed him to imagine a better self without remaining with one task long enough to encounter frustration. Now there was nowhere to escape. The retention system became difficult in week 3. 2 departments refused to share clean data. His first model produced conclusions everyone already knew. Iris questioned one of his assumptions in front of the team. The old Marcus would have started redesigning his business website that night. Progress elsewhere would have softened the feeling of failure. Instead, he stayed with the problem. He asked Iris to show him where the assumption broke. She did. For the first time, Marcus stopped treating her focus as a threat and began learning from it. Together, they discovered that renewals were not failing for one reason. Customers who used 2 specific features during their first month were far more likely to remain. The company did not need another general satisfaction campaign. It needed a way to help new customers reach those 2 behaviors earlier. By month 3, Marcus had a working model. By month 4, one customer success team was using it. By month 5, the pilot group had changed its onboarding process. The results were not miraculous, but they were visible, useful, and difficult to dismiss. 6 months after the presentation that failed, Marcus stood before the leadership team again. This time, he did not need to describe his potential. He showed them the system. Iris presented the pilot results. Marcus explained what they had learned and what the company should test next. The chief operating officer asked questions for 20 minutes. At the end, she said, "I want this expanded to the other teams. Marcus, can you lead that?" The sentence was smaller than the fantasy on his vision board. It was also real. Focus had not made Marcus less ambitious. It had made his ambition observable. You cannot build 10 futures with one ordinary life, but you can choose one future whose construction changes the person building it. So how do you choose your own 6-month direction? Begin with the finish line. What evidence could exist 180 days from now that would make the period meaningful even if no one applauded? A completed portfolio, a debt reduced by a specific amount, a professional skill demonstrated in public, a finished manuscript, a health routine you can sustain, a repaired pattern in one relationship. Choose something you can influence through repeated action, not an outcome that depends entirely on another person saying yes. Then name the price. What will pause? What will remain in maintenance mode? Which attractive opportunity will you decline because it belongs to a different season? Do not write everything else on the sacrifice list. Protect the people, health, and obligations that make achievement worth having. Finally, define weekly proof. What must exist by Friday? What will you be able to show, send, test, save, practice, or complete? If your only evidence is that you thought about the goal is still living inside your imagination. Focus is not choosing what matters and declaring everything else meaningless. It is having the courage to let a good future wait so one necessary future can become real. Which goal would make several other parts of your life easier if you completed it? Which goal are you keeping alive only because letting it go would hurt your identity? And what would change if, for 180 days, you stopped trying to look ambitious and built one piece of undeniable evidence instead? Marcus did not delete the rest of his vision board. He placed it in a drawer labeled, "Not Now." That label mattered. Focus did not require him to say those futures were impossible. It required him to stop asking the present to carry all of them at once. But choosing one future creates another problem. Your phone can still interrupt it. Other people can still fill your calendar. The world can still divide your attention into hundreds of pieces before breakfast. In the next episode, we will explore how to disappear for 6 months without abandoning your work, relationships, or responsibilities. How to remove noise, build an attention perimeter, and become less available to distraction without becoming emotionally unavailable to the people who matter. Because the goal is not to vanish from your life, it is to become fully present inside it. Until then, remember, you do not need another life. You may simply need another way to see this one.